My shelves feel a little bare. I feel a little out in the open because my setup's literally right in front of our enclosed patio's window. I had to put the decorations up, just moved, and I think my ankle's wonky. Hey friends, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about a book that came out last month, but I was too stressed out about moving and wedding planning and needed a serious medication adjustment for me to be able to film and function like a normal human being. But that review is going to be for Sunrise and the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. Now, I want to give this as non-spoilery as possible, but this is the prequel to the trilogy that happened already, so it does reference things that will be happening in the future. And we already know what happens in Haymitch's games because Haymitch is the one currently alive. Let's just kind of get into it because I have a lot of amazing thoughts and I just have a lot of feelings with this book. I don't know if I can scrounge it up anymore because it's been like a month since then, but who knows? Who knows? We all know that I'm a crier. Okay, so starting off with the synopsis, obviously this follows Haymitch Abernathy on, I think, his 16th or 17th birthday. He was born on the day of the Reaping, which is July 4th. And he is incidentally reaped for the 50th Hunger Games. Now, this is the second quarter quell in the history of TIIIME, and the second quarter quell involves having pulled twice as many kids from each district. So instead of the usual one boy, one girl, we get 2 boys and 2 girls. With 48 tributes going into the arena, it makes it not only more bloodthirsty, more brutal, more heartbreaking, but Haymitch kind of has to figure out what he wants to live for and why he wants to get out of the arena so badly. Obviously, trigger warnings for this. There's a lot of blood and gore. There is political propaganda. I don't know if that's a trigger warning, but I guess at this day and age, why not? There's political propaganda. There is blood, gore, I mentioned that. Violence, political punishments, I guess. Yeah, let's just kind of hop into my first thoughts. Obviously, this is a Hunger Games novel. Now, we all know my thoughts on Songbird Ballads and Snakes. I did not like it when I first read it. I need to reread it to see if my thoughts have changed, if I have somehow evolved since the first read-through. But I wasn't the biggest fan of the sudden shift from reading from a hero's perspective to switching to a full-blown, like, the villain of the story. So I was really excited to hear about Haymitch's story, mainly because his is a very special case. We don't know anything about Haymitch past what happened to him in the 50th Games, or before what happened to him in the 50th Games. All we know is that he was one of 4 District 12 tributes, and he was the only victor, obviously, out of the 48 kids that went into that arena. We have no idea how his arena looked like, and we also just know that he has become the example for the Finnicks and Joannas and Cashmeres of the world to comply with what Snow wants them to do, lest they lose their loved ones forever. I knew going into this book that I was going to cry, that I was going to have my heart broken. I knew that getting attached to these characters was not the smartest move in history, but yet I did it anyway. So with all this going in, I still jumped headfirst into the book. I'm going to start off with kind of the stronger points of this book that I think, and then we're going to move down to kind of like, this book was strong all the way around, but we're going to move into like the parts that I had to like really nitpick and figure out what I didn't like about it. The first one are the characters. Obviously, like, Suzanne Collins is well known for her characters. They're well-rounded. They have their own values, their own separate identities besides just being so-and-so's sister, so-and-so's friend, so-and-so, just so-and-so. So even though we got to spend very little time with some of these tributes, we did get to know them. I feel like in comparison to the 74th Hunger Games, which is the first book, we get to know these characters a little more because Haymitch is more willing and more sociable than Katniss was. Katniss, despite her being a unreliable narrator, doubted that anyone ever liked her throughout the entire trilogy when it was the exact opposite. Whereas Haymitch is very sociable, he's very charismatic, he likes to talk to people and make friends, and he knows exactly how to socialize. Haymitch, especially as a narrator, as a character that we read through, knowing where he ends up by the trilogy, being this alone and angry and just miserable drunk, was quite heartbreaking to read in this book. There's literally a line, I think in the first couple pages, where he goes, yeah, I work for so-and-so who's a, like an illegal alcohol maker, but I don't drink. And I just had to take a breath from that line because it's so vastly different from who Haymitch is. You think he and Katniss are more alike in terms of their personality as Haymitch is as an adult, but in reality, he was very different from Katniss from day one. Their character arcs are very much foils of each other, I guess like complements of each other, both had a father die in the mines. The difference here is that Haymitch's mother decides to work through her grief and provide for her family, so Haymitch was able to be an actual big brother instead of a parent, gets to have an actual brotherly relationship with his younger brother Sid. Whereas Katniss, her mom goes into like a catatonic depressive episode, and she has to become the parent for her mother, for her sister, and her mother. So you can see kind of where it diverges and where their characters are vastly different. There were so many lovely characters in this book. I didn't think I would get attached to any of them, truth be told, mainly because it's just like reading from Katniss's head. She's not the most sociable person, but Haymitch is out here making friends and interacting with everyone and forming alliances, and you get to really meet the characters. You get to see each of the tributes, and you get to meet them for who they are and get to learn all about like what they want to do, why they're here. I feel like Maisily and Ampert were definitely standouts of the book. They were just so heartbreaking. All I wanted to do was protect Ampert. I knew it was going to happen. I knew that this little dude was not going to make it out, but nothing could prepare me exactly for how he went out, and that was just absolutely brutal. But knowing exactly why that happened, because of Snow, was equally as brutal. Like I said, Maisily was a standout character. I really just felt her come alive off the page. I think she just had this like anger and rage inside of her. Like Suzanne Collins mentions in the interview here that Maisily is her angriest character that she's written. And I could really relate to Maisily in terms of her anger and her rage toward a system that was never built for her. She was angry and hurt toward a system that was designed for her to be miserable no matter which way she spun it, no matter how she like tried to forge a new relationship or tried to like go up in the echelons of this world. It was just never built for her, and I really, really understood that rage, and I really empathized and could relate to that anger that she had. And just something about Maisily as a character was just like, there was something very beautiful about Maisily as a character. Like, I didn't think I would like her because she was described to be this very hoity-toity, but the way that she went about everything, I think she would have really loved Peeta, who knew kind of how the games worked and knew how to play around it. I love seeing all the other characters too. Like, it was a surprise to see Mags and Wyrus pop in, but obviously they're the only the District 12 is the only one without victors so far, so of course they would have to supplement with other victors from other areas, and I really love seeing them. I love seeing Effie, I love seeing Beetee. I think everyone had a lot of comments online saying that it felt like it was too many cameos and too much like callbacks, but I think it was perfect because if you think about it, the games have only been going on at this point for 50 years. Do the math slightly. Mags is 58 and she was in the 4th Hunger Games, I think. She was the victor of the 11th Hunger Games. So, and like Wyrus had won the year prior, I think, to Haymitch. So it makes sense that they would all be kind of a very close-knit group and one that would pop up continuously throughout the series, because realistically, there's probably 20 of them that are still left alive. Realistically, I don't know the exact number, but obviously Lucy Gray Baird would have been one, and that was just the 10th Hunger Games. So to me, it made a lot of sense for there to be a lot of callback and a lot of like relating back to the actors who were before, because it didn't make any other sense that they would not be around, not be present. And I think that including Effie as well, to just kind of showcase that propaganda hits everyone, and for her to have a more like stable relationship with Haymitch before she actually becomes a mentor, I think was especially important, because there's always been a weird bond between the two of them that you can't really describe, but I think it came off why it made sense for her to come up before he became a victor. Moving on to the themes of this novel, I think Suzanne might have gone a little heavy-handed on these, obviously, but I could understand why given the current political climate of the world right now. She went through themes such as like propaganda, resiliency, of implicit submission. There was even a little bit of a hint of like her thoughts on like AI. I don't think it's really much of a theme, but I guess like the kid be like, you cannot imitate art in a sense, and I think that really came through. It talked a lot, like the games that we see in the second book of Catching Fire are vastly different from what actually happens in Sunrise and the Reaping. The entire time I was reading, I was like, wow, this does not sound familiar at all. And I was like, maybe just because I haven't read the books. Then we get to the point where Haymitch is rewatching the recap. and he finds out that his games have been entirely altered. That to the people viewing the games, there's about a 5-minute delay. And in those 5 minutes, the game makers or whoever else is back there deletes and adjusts everything happening in the games. And I think that just kind of goes to show that no one can't be affected by propaganda. Something that, like, I think for Suzanne Collins, she's trying to say that for you to unlearn what propaganda is trying to push at you, it's an active thing. We fell for the propaganda of how Haymitch's games actually worked out. And everyone in the books fell for that propaganda because they don't want Haymitch to become this hero. They don't want him to be the face of this like rebellion that was happening. Moving on to the themes of resilience, I think it was very important for Suzanne Collins to kind of subvert that chosen one trope with Katniss, because we are all like, oh yeah, the revolutionist because she's, you know, the chosen one. No. Actually, in the book here, we learn that the rebellion has been happening or trying to happen for several years, maybe decades, before even Haymitch was around. And I think it's important to show because rebellions don't take... Boy.
Other people live here.
I know. Because I think rebellions take time. She's trying to show that rebellions take time, and that in order for a rebellion to be successful, you have to be resilient and continue on the fight, even if it doesn't seem like it's possible. As well as her thoughts on like implicit submission. There's like a quote. There's like 4 quotes in the beginning of this book that literally talks about all the themes that you'll ever have to think about in this book. So I feel like if you didn't get that there, then we might have to work on your critical reading skills, but that's fine. It's an easy fix, I promise. But within that same vein, she talks about implicit submission and how we as a people place all of our like bets on a higher power, so to speak, the government. And I think it really goes to show here where we're seeing a lot of people, even Mace Lee's entire character is like against being just submissive to the government in her own little way. And I think Mace Lee as a character is a good representation of this theme because she does not want to be seen. She does not want to just like allow this government to govern her entire existence and tell her what's best for her when it's clearly not the best thing for her. So I think Suzanne Collins really did a good job of like trying to share these themes and messages in ways that you could understand and that were understandable, kind of in your face because, you know, given the climate, but also subtle enough for you to be able to pick it apart on your own. I don't know if it's a theme or not, but maybe like the concept that art cannot be replaced. The subtle smack at AI that she gave out with Luella and Lulu, that you cannot replace art with a manufactured thing. Moving on to the writing of this, I think it's one of Suzanne Collins' like cornerstones is her writing style. It's very descriptive. I think she creates these characters that are very vibrant and great narrators. We see a really stark contrast to how Katniss sees the world, where like, yeah, she's very unreliable because she's very limited in her views. Then we see Snow's perspective where he's kind of a shithead. And then we also see Haymitch, who is Katniss point 2, where he's like seeing a little bit more than Katniss does from her limited perspective. He can kind of like look at the bird's eye view a little more than Katniss can, and they're all very distinct. And if you put the books side by side to each other, obviously Snow's is going to stick out because he's third person, but if you put them side by side to each other, I could probably pick out which book or which POV it is or who it is. I think it's just a cornerstone. I think she's a very descriptive writer. She has this wonderful way with words to describe everything that's happening in amazing, painful detail. So thank you so much for that, Suzanne. I will never look at squirrels or flamingos the same way again. Moving on to the last thing, like I said, I have to be very nitpicky with this. I feel like the pacing was my biggest concern in this book. We have 382 pages of this novel, whereas I don't even know how much Songbirds has. But I feel like there were definitely moments where I wanted to see more of a scene or more of a development, specifically kind of toward the end, and I feel like it had just gotten rushed. There were definitely some death scenes as well where I was like, I get why this has to happen. I'm not mad that it's happening, sort of, but I'm more mad that, to me, Snow didn't have the idea to like give him a little bit and then take everything away. He just kind of took everything. I feel like it took away some of the gravitas of the moment, some of the oomph. But again, very nitpicky here. Obviously, I feel like she might have benefited from an extra 50 to 100 pages simply because she probably could have told the entirety of the story that she wanted to tell in that amount. Because Suzanne Collins is like, if you want to know how to be a concise writer while still allowing yourself to be descriptive and kind of paint pictures for your readers. My overall thoughts, 5 out of 5 stars, obviously. I think there are a lot of important things on this, one of them being that we subverted that chosen one trope, and we get to see Suzanne Collins literally tell us that rebellions do not happen all at once. Rebellions do not happen because a perfect person showed up. In fact, she's saying that rebellions happen because people took the time and the effort to sacrifice, to put themselves on the line, to find an imperfect leader who was just willing to take the reins and say, we're gonna get from point A to maybe point 8.9. And it worked. I think that's very important to have, because I feel like a lot of the chosen one tropes that we have kind of influenced our minds into anticipating for the perfect hero in certain aspects when that is never gonna be the case. So I like that she included this in her themes and her messages. And I think it's a very important book to read, obviously, but all the Hunger Games books are, because she just has something to say. And I highly recommend it if you have not gotten a chance to read it, or you're like waiting to like hear reviews or anything on it. Highly recommend it. But that is it for my review of Sunrise on the Reaping. If you guys like this video, let me know in the comments down below. If you guys have read it, let me know all your thoughts. I would say be mindful of spoilers, but we already know what happens more or less in his games from the previous trilogies, so. But until then, stay safe, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.